Hello friends, today we will be working further with our project, and today we will mainly discuss about the core mechanism of Spring. But before going further, let me introduce you some of the concepts related to, I would say, some of the print commands that we can, as we know, we are using system.out.println to get the result printed. But for the when we are working on some of project at the industry level, we will not be using this command. We will be using some loggers to get the data printed. For that, let me show you how we will be working on it. Let me open the Eclipse. Here I'll show you some of the commands that has been used and get the data to be printed using the logger command. For that, we have some of the dependencies, as we have the logging dependencies here, and using that we will be working over here. As here we can see, we first import the slf4j.logger, and then we'll import slf4j.logger factory. And once we do the imports, we will do the because we are doing the imports of these packaging, then we will use the basic definition of logger, as this is our class addition controller. So we use this definition. Here we have logger factory dot get logger addition controller dot class. This is the name of the class. Whatever will be the name of the class, we will be using here as it is. We'll pass the same over here. And after getting giving the definition for this logger, to get the result to print, we will use logger.info, and here what the result we want to get printed. So in this way we will be getting our result printed, uh, rather than using the very basic commands of system.out.println. We will be using this logger.info commands. Basically, although there are more ways, but generally we will be using these logger.info, and we want our data to be printed. So in this way we will be printing the data and we get the output. And so this is what I want to know all of you before moving further with the main topic for today. That will I'll say is the core mechanism, which is the core mechanism of Spring. So for this, I'll say first let me write the main definition. What the core mechanism? What it say? The object creation and the management will be done by the Spring itself, and the developer needs not to do anything. And this concept is basically known as IOC. What does it mean is inversion of control. Now let me tell you what this inversion of control term means. Basically, when we were working with some core Java concepts, the developers were creating the objects at their own. But now Spring itself do the same for the developers, and developers need not to do anything. So what does it mean and why it started? Tell you let me tell you. Yeah. So using this, let me open one of the whiteboard. So here we can see, let we have some of the class. And for this, if we are creating, like there are multiple developers that are working on this particular project. One is creating the object like this, other is creating the same object, but a new one. So in this way, they are overflowing the heap. So to avoid this such situation, we can say to avoid the situation of overflowing the heap memory, as well as not closing the open connections that are not in use currently. We have the concept of IOC. What does it mean? That the control of creating the object has been inverted or reversed. So we must say it means the control of creating the object has been inverted or reversed from the developer to the spring. So this is what the inversion of control means. Now the next question that raises is, how does the spring creates and manages the objects? We can even consider one of the example. Let me show you in the code itself. Here we have this REST controller. Uh, so as we can see here, this is the controller, and it is not the only command that we are giving. There are lot many things that are inside this REST controller. So many objects has been created, and apart from that, we are still working on creating these objects manually. But as now the spring has the control, now the question raises, how does this spring creates and manages such objects? So answer for this is, the spring has a container that manages the objects, and here these objects that are created within this container is known as the spring beans. So these are the spring beans basically. So for that, let me show you how we will be working on this. For this, let me close this. So basically for this, I'll say, let's suppose we have this spring application, and for this, so this is our spring application, and inside this spring application we have a container. Let me represent it like this, and we must name it as a container. And inside this container, whatever objects will be there, let me write one of the object, and this is nothing but addition controller object, and whatever are the objects over here will be known as spring beans. Apart from that, let me have one of the class outside this. uh, Let me reduce the size. uh, Let me shift it over here. Apart from that, let outside this container we have a class which is my service, let's suppose. And inside this class we are creating some of the objects manually. Here is the object that is being created inside this class, and We want this object to move inside this container. This is the object that has been created manually by the developer, but we want this object to be created inside the container, and for that we must use one of the annotation as component. Once we use this annotation, whatever the object is there for this class will be created inside the container. And now, as we can see here, for this particular class my service, we have two different objects. One is the object that is being created by the developer, and the second one is the object that is being created by the Spring itself. So we have two different objects for the same class and it is of no use. So either we should create it manually or we should take the help of Spring using the annotation component. So we must write it over here using the definition for. Before moving further, let me introduce you two types of. There are basically there are two types of container. One is bean factory container, and the second one is application context container, which here we can see this application context container is the advanced version of these two container, and this is used by the Spring by default. So these are the two containers, and basically whatever we are using here, we will be using application context container. And for that, as we have already seen, we can use component to get the object to be created by the Spring. So we must write over here component. This is the annotation by which Spring creates automatic object. And apart from that, next question that raised into our mind is, here we can see we have two objects. This is the first object. Let me write it O1, and this is the second object. Let me write it as O2. Now we want this object must use the second object. So the question that raised into the mind is, how do one component, or we can say Spring Bean, will access the another component or Spring Bean? So this is the second question that comes to our mind. So basically, to access one of the Spring Bean by the other, we will be having two different ways. One is dependency injection, and the second one is dependency lookup. For this, let me tell you, we have two different ways while working with dependency injection. We can do it in two ways. One is field injection, and the second one is constructor injection, while this is the preferred one. Now let's discuss what is the field injection. When we are using the annotation like at the rate component, and we have the field my service, my service, this is our field, and we are assigning at the rate component to this field directly. So this is the field injection, and the second one is constructor injection, and this can be done manually. As here, let me take an example. For this, we have private, we have the same class. Let me take here private as well. And here we have public addition controller, and here we do the constructor injection. Then we do the print commands. As I have already discussed, we will be using here logger.info and whatever output we want, and then we do the assignment as this dot my service is my service. So this is the way how we do the constructor injection, and this is the way how we do the field injection. Apart from this, this is the dependency injection that we do while working on this. As whenever we will be working here, we might get some of the suggestions. There are some static code analyzer. Let me write over here. We have a sonar, we say basically, which is a static code analyzer that it helps to choose the preferred one, as in case of dependency injection. So some suggestions will be given by this within the IDE, and using these suggestions we can work on, or we can see this how this constructor injection is much better than the field injection. Basically the reason being, here we are giving the component at the field level, and here we will be giving it at the value level. Here we will be assigning it to directly to some of the value. As here we can see we are doing it by creating some of the object by the spring, but the same thing can be done. This is what the object creation that is done by the spring, but it can be done manually as well. uh, Manually object creation that can be done as we must have my service is equals to new. This is the main, or we can say basic Java concept that we use while creating the object. And in this way, I'll show you where the object will get created basically. So this is how we are creating the object manually. Like over here, we will be using this particular method. Even we can copy it from here and paste here, so that you guys can uh, make a difference how and relate it how we are using it. And this is how we are creating the objects over Here, let me print it over here. Let's minimize it. Yeah. So this is how we are creating the objects for the same class by the Spring, and this is how it is created manually. But the thing is, this is how we are creating the object, and we were discussing how the dependency injection can be done either by the field injection or with the help of constructor injection. And the use of this constructor injection is much better than the field injection, as I have already discussed that here we will be assigning to the field itself, but here we will be assigning to the value directly. So it is much better than the field injection. Apart from that, once we do this dependency injection either through this at the rate component or through the constructor injection, then when we will be referring to the object, as we can see here, we have we already knew that how we get reference to that particular object. So our next question become how to get at the rate components object, or we can say how we get the reference of the service object. And for that, I must say we will be using the service as at the rate auto wired, because whenever we are not giving any reference to the object and we will be calling, if no at the rate auto wired has been used, and whenever we will be calling the object, then we get a null pointer error. This basically define because no reference to the object assigned to the controller, and we are calling this method. So by default, we get a null object. So whenever we will be using dependency injection, we must use at the rate auto wired and private my service my service. Now Spring will give the object reference. So here we must say now the Spring will give the object reference, and hence we can use it. So as we have written the definition for at the rate component, I must write here uh, itself. At the rate component gives Spring that creates automatic object, and at the rate auto wired it gives, like we can say, Spring creates reference to the object automatically. Now using component we have created the object, and using AutoWide we have created the reference. Now if there is no at the rate component, it implies no object has been created. And if in this case we are calling at the rate auto wired, we get a Spring start to fail error. So there are two errors that we have seen. One is the null pointer error, and the second one is Spring is start to fail. Null pointer error occurs when we are using at the rate component but no auto wired. That means reference has not been provided. And this spring start to fail error occurs when we are using at the rate auto wired. We are referring some of the objects, but that object has not been created using at the rate component. That's why we are getting spring start to fail error in this case. So this is how we will be working using dependency injection. Apart from that, the second part that we need to cover is the dependency lookup. As I have already discussed that in case of dependency injection, we will be basically object reference will directly assigned. So in case of dependency injection, here I must say the object reference will directly assigned to you. And in case of dependency lookup, here we must ask when you need to ask for it. So now in our case, we will be working on dependency lookups. What here will do, let me show the diagram here. So in this case, we will create another object here and we will name it as, let me write over here, application context bean. Let me reduce the size. And here this is the application context bean, and once this bean has been created, then directly it can do the dependency injection. If we want this object to be used or this object to be used, basically it will ask the spring whatever object it is asking to use. So in this case, we must say spring framework creates an object of application context, and using this object you can access any spring bean. This application context bean is also a spring bean, and if another bean wants to access it, we can simply dependency injection. We can simply do the dependency injection. Once we get it, we get this application context. It provides multiple methods to access any spring bean from the container. One of the method I'll show you here itself. We can use application context dot get bean. Here is our class my service dot class. Although there are multiple methods that can be used to get once we have this application context being created. So here we can see there are multiple uh, methods basically to go to the spring container, and here once it has been created it will ask for the required bean like my service or whatever it wants to get. So in this way, as we can see here, once this bean has been created, it can ask for another object from the spring. So because it is asking from the spring for another object, that's why this injection or this way of dealing with the objects within the different spring beans, and this method is known as dependency lookup. So this is what I want you to teach for today about the dependency injection and dependency lookup, how the beans are being created by the spring, and how the reference being created and will be used for the further in the coding itself. So what are the errors, how one of the annotation, if it is missed, some kind of errors that can be generated. So, using this, I hope all these terms are much clear to you. See you next. Bye.